Thank you so much for coming back in and grabbing the treats. If you could please take your seats, we are going to get started with the afternoon plenary and continuing the great conversations that we started from this morning, carried on to the breakout rooms, and we'll wrap up today's program. I'm going to welcome Debbie back to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Esteban. Thank you so much, everybody. Oh my gosh, what a morning that was. Wow, I just thought it was amazing. And we are excited this afternoon to dive into a topic that came up a lot, actually, this morning about kind of the changing media landscape and how to navigate it. But it is my opportunity, a very happy opportunity right now to introduce the first speaker, a person that many of you in this room know and love, Ian Kahn. This is a very personal introduction for me because in one of the better strikes of luck in my life, I was introduced to Ian many years ago when he was finishing up the show as an actor, AMC's Turn, Washington Spies. If you have not seen it, you should. But at the time, he was very concerned about the future of our country and was wondering how he could make a difference and get into politics. And when we met, I was, like I said, a very strike of luck for me, and we worked together. And he fast forward now 6 years, and he's now working with so many leaders in this room. He's working with members of Congress and really transforming the way that we communicate. Many of you have reached out to me when you've been able to work with him as a communications coach. And what he does, as you know, is not the usual tricks and tips, although he does have those, but he helps us communicate authentically and from the heart. And as we heard today so many times, that is the key to everything. So I am so grateful that he's here to speak to us today. I'll give you Ian Kahn.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, everybody. It's so great to be here with all of you. The first thing I want to say, just to take a moment, is to mention something about Helen Milby, who is stepping down after 15 years as the head of the chairman of the board of New Deal, of both that and the ideas side. And she's still part of our world and part of our team, but it really is, I'm not sure if Helen is even here right now, but I just want to ask us all to just give her a round of applause because she is so very central to so many things that have happened for this organization and for so many other organizations. Literally everywhere you go, it's like Helen Milby, Helen Milby, Helen Milby, and we are all better for it. So I just wanted to take that moment. You know, it's funny to be here because the first thing I did in politics, was give a speech at, I believe, the New Deal Summit in Denver in 2019. That was the very first time I stepped out of my role as a professional actor and stepped into the world of politics. And because of Debbie Cox-Bolton, who is our champion and leader at this magnificent organization, the New Deal, because of Debbie Cox-Bolton, every single positive thing that has happened in my professional life is because of the woman who introduced me on that day and just introduced me again. So it's funny because this is the most recent thing I'm doing in politics. And I am so grateful, Debbie, wherever you are. Thank you. Communication is very important. Why? Why is communication so important? I have a sign in my office that I have shown to many of you through the years. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. How they feel. The politicians, political leaders tend to put a projection of themselves up. This projection, they believe, this projection shows the best part of them. How smart they are, how nice they are, how tough, whatever they think is it that will make them most appealing to their constituents. Now the problem is that when political leaders are nervous in a big spot, like a debate or an interview, that projection tends to slip, right? And then you spend the rest of that interview or debate just trying to put that projection back into place. And audiences, constituents, they see that, they can feel it. And that's why when I first started working with political leaders on their communication skills, actor friends of mine, they would say, why are you doing that? They're all liars. And I said, no, no, no. They just look like they're lying because they're trying to be something that they think people want. That's not what they want. What they want is actually you. Now, it's tricky because the projection is also, it feels like a protection. It's hard what y'all do, right? Y'all make choices, and then someone asks you, wait, well, why'd you do that? And you don't want to say anything stupid. So the projection feels like a protection. It isn't. It blocks who you are. Now, who you are, typically, you're the best of us. You're the bravest. You're the smartest. You're the most patriotic. You are the givers. Because it ain't about the money. And it isn't about the glory. There's more trouble than glory. You care. And you are the best of the best. You're New Deal leaders. You were chosen to be part of this organization. You're the best of us. Now, I kind of got into this work as a political communications coach because the last television role I played, as Debbie said, was as General George Washington on the TV show Turn Washington Spies. I got into politics because I played George Washington. Imperfect, great man who sacrificed self for what he believed to be a greater cause. That's you. That's every single one of you. And I know what you deal with. And I mean, it's not just fighting against Trump and an authoritarian takeover of our republic that has stood for almost 250 years. It's also all of our friends, our fellow Democrats. It's all hard. And you're there for it. You're willing to sacrifice for the greater good. You are the best of us. There is simply no projection that you can put up that can compare remotely to your excellence. So we let them see us. All of it. You. That spot inside. How do we get there? That spot is the spot that makes you a digital creator, superstar, viral human political leader. Now, who has it? Think to yourself right now, please, if you would, in your mind, who are the particular top communicators right now in politics? Everyone, just grab one for yourself. Think of them. They share something, I bet. They all share themselves. We know them, we feel them. I've got one, Donald Trump. Surprised, huh? Probably weren't thinking of that one. That man, our president, is himself. Think about it. Got another one, Barack Obama, it's better. You know it's just him talking, not some idea of him, it's him. So that's where we gotta go. Now, it's different with everybody. Everybody's got a different lock and a different key, but everyone can get there. All you need is commitment, focus, and vulnerability. And so that's the thing. The projection allows no vulnerability to get through, and you need vulnerability. They need to see you. They need to see you think. They need to see you be. And here's what's cool. Here at the New Deal, because of Debbie and the whole crew, we teach you. We show you how to do it. Now, sure, you don't have to be yourself, but you won't become a consistently good or powerful communicator if you're not yourself. You won't. You won't be as appealing as a cat. You won't. And if you do get there, it doesn't mean you will become viral, but the chances go up. A lot. You'll be a ton happier and much more electable So that's good. That's fun. It works. Get to you, and you can't lose. I mean, if it's like a Trump plus 22 district. But the path of authenticity, that's the way. We are looking for the next generation of founding mothers and founding fathers of this country. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you all for your service to your communities, to our entire nation. You are seen. You are excellent. And we are grateful. Thank you. Good, it was only 5 minutes, that's good. I wanna take this opportunity to introduce one of the next generation of founding mothers and founding fathers of this country. A 27-month veteran of combat, one of the most patriotic human beings that I know, who loves this country. I'm honored to call him my partner in this work and to call him my friend, Representative Pat Ryan.
Good afternoon. That was a little weak. I'm gonna be honest. After that speech, good afternoon. Excellent. Ian. Anybody who's worked with Ian, when we see each other and we ask each other how we are, we know what the answer is. Excellent. For those of you that have not worked with Ian, I've worked with him for the last few years. Not only has he made me a better communicator, he's made me a happier person. I think my wife would say a better husband, marginally. And just more true and aligned to why I'm doing this work. So I think one of the greatest services that New Deal provides to folks is the opportunity to work with Ian, and strongly encourage everybody to do that and push yourself out of your comfort zone while doing so, if I may offer that. That is not the main reason I'm here. I wasn't even supposed to be here, actually. We added a day of votes for the House, so I'm here one more day and not in New York, and really excited that I got to be with you for 2 or 3 minutes. The main reason I'm here, and I'm sandwiched between two, like literally two of my favorite people in the world and in this work that we're doing. So I'm here to not hawk a book, although this is an amazing book. I think actually, I don't think I've ever like carried around a book and said, you have to read this book. I am not that guy. I really try to not be that guy. But when I read Comeback, and you're gonna hear from Stephen and Layla's here as well, it was right after, a month or two after round 2 of a Trump victory, and we're all feeling everything we're feeling. And when I read the book and I finished it in like 24 hours, maybe 36 hours, I was like, yes, this is all the things I was feeling and thinking that were bouncing around in my head, but all put together in such a compelling articulation of both part 1 is kind of where we go wrong and challenging a lot of the conventional wisdom of how Democrats think about policy, but also how we talk about policy and how we talk about the world. And then part 2, more importantly, offers the antidote to that. And this idea, which I know you're gonna hear about in a second, of, to me, the dual imperatives that all Democrats should be leaning into. 1, dominance. Dominance and strength of conviction and righteousness. And 2, patriotism. And when you put those 2 things together, we are righteous and dominant in our cause, and our cause is noble and patriotic, and creating the widest possible umbrella for every American to hearken back to what's so great and so core to liberty and justice for all. Like, that's when we win. That's always when we've won. And I think you guys have captured that so well in the moment, the crazy moment that we're in. So please join me in a very warm round of applause for, I think, are you coming up, just you, Stephen, or are you both coming up? Okay, for Stephen Fish. Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks so much, Pat. That is so kind. Following you and Ian is not an enviable thing. I wasn't anticipating being in this situation. So what I'd like to talk about, though, as Pat just mentioned, is the politics of dominance. Now, part of the book is about the need to seize the flag, but I don't have time to talk about that today. So let's just talk a little bit about dominance politics. So I start with the question, how did we get Trump? And how has he controlled the narrative over the past decade, even while he was out of office? Let's face it, even when Biden was president, Trump got more attention than Biden. Well, obviously, it's not because his policies are so appealing or because he's such a charming personality. It's because he's a master of what I call dominance politics. He seems like a boss, and Democrats have too often seemed like poll and policy-obsessed petitioners, people pleasers, and panderers by comparison. So I'm a political scientist who has studied for many decades challenges to democracy around the world and people fighting for their freedom, people getting it if they don't have it, and recovering it if they lose it. And what I've noticed is a remarkable commonality among cases where illiberal, democracy-demolishing demagogues have won elections and taken power. So from Trump to his heroes Putin in Russia, to Orban in Hungary, from Narendra Modi in India to Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines, illiberal leaders have established reputations and focused on establishing reputations as indomitable doers of great things who would not be swayed by public opinion polls and short-term political considerations. Such figures also focused intensively on claiming superiority as patriots and protectors of the nation. But they succeeded, I found, for the most part, only where democracy's defenders had acquired reputations as petitioners of public opinion, rather than as strong leaders, and where liberal Democrats had forfeited their national flags. What's more, where pro-democratic liberals actually challenged those who had replaced them in office, they reclaimed the flag. They reestablished their reputations as strong leaders. They actually won again. So look at Brazil, look at Poland recently. These are good examples. So what I found in my research is politics is a dominance game and a contest to capture the flag. Those who seem to be the strongest leaders and the most ardent patriots hold the advantage. Of course, politics, of course, policies and governance matters, and you guys are down in the trenches with these every day. But by conveying our policies and our accomplishments in a high dominance way and wrapping them in the flag, we can win more often and accomplish more in office. FDR, JFK, LBJ, MLK, those guys who dominated American politics during the second third of the 20th century. And let's face it, we need another such period of dominance today just to restore democracy to our country. They understood everything I'm talking about very well. These leaders owned the Republicans for over 3 decades. And in the course of doing so, they enacted practically every progressive piece of legislation that we are fighting a rearguard action to preserve today, not to mention saving democracy in the process. For now, I'm going to leave aside the imperative of recapturing the flag from the Republicans and focus on what I call the politics of dominance. It is a way of doing politics that has faded among Democrats in this century, and recovering it is key to beating MAGA. It's interesting, this has not received a lot of attention in political science. It has received attention in social and political psychology, and that research I've really drawn on, as well as my comparative work and kind of coming up with this theory and doing the research. So what is a high dominance leader? Let me click forward a little bit here. There we go. What is a high dominance leader? First, it's somebody who aims to shape reality, including public opinion. The high dominance leader tells her own truth and tries to make us think like she does. And her message does not shift in response to opponents' reactions. It does not shift in response to public opinion polls. The low dominance politician reads polls and tells us what he thinks we want to hear. Whether or not voters share or are swayed to the high dominance leader's policy positions does not matter. The high dominance leader earns a reputation for courage, honesty, constancy, and authenticity, and that's what counts to voters. Mamdani didn't win recently in New York because most New Yorkers have been, swayed to socialism or want to globalize the intifada. He won because he seemed to be the strongest, most constant leader. He won because, and he's capturing our imaginations because he tells his own truth and he doesn't back down when he encounters polls that show most New Yorkers actually don't necessarily want what he does. Consequently, he won over even many, many New Yorkers who actually did not share his policy positions, and he doesn't back down. Second, the high dominance leader embraces risk and is always on the offense. These days, with these opponents, you can never be on the defense. You always have to play offense. The high dominance leader knows that politics is an us versus them game as well, no less than sports and war. He at least intuits that us versus them messaging is required to create a sense of strong in-group identity among followers. Liberals don't like to hear what I just said. It's just a fact. People feel strong solidarity with each other and are willing to sacrifice for their leader and their cause only if they regard their movement and their cause and their leader as distinctive and morally superior to the other side. Dwelling on fact-checking opponents is a low dominance move. There is no more defensive low dominance move, though, and I have to say this, than basking in umbrage. And Democrats have become specialists in basking in umbrage, and it's costing us dearly. You can't be on the offensive when you're consumed with being offended. Still worse is holding up your opponent's offensive statements and trying to get other people good and offended. Unfortunately, Hillary Clinton, who in many ways is a very strong personality, specialized in doing this in 2016. Women, did you hear that sexist remark Trump just made? Latinos, did you hear what he just said about you? And that she repeated again and again and again. So Trump was always the news. You were hearing Trump's crazy stuff or Hillary repeating Trump's crazy stuff. And we started making that mistake again last year. So on the eve of the election, you guys can remember this, some comedian at a Trump rally made some crack about Puerto Rico. Do you remember that? And then he also made some characteristically condescending statement about women. And President Harris spent the precious final 2 weeks of her campaign not talking about her own great ideas, not cranking us up about what she was going to offer us, not saying never again, never going back. She spent the last couple of weeks of her campaign trying to get Hispanics and women and other groups offended by what Trump had said. Well, in the event, she did surprisingly mediocre in a mediocre job with women voters, and as we all know, Hispanics swung to Trump by 27 points. Apparently the folks just weren't as offended as she wanted them to be. Instead, of course, Harris could have ridiculed Trump and treated him like an impetuous toddler in need of a timeout. And then, in fact, that's pretty much what she did during that first half of her campaign. Do you remember the euphoria we felt when she stepped out like a boss on July 21st? Do you remember that feeling? And she carried that all the way through September 10th and the immediate aftermath of that debate, where she completely shellacked Trump. But then, and only then, she fell back on the Democrats' low dominance modus operandi, and that's, of course, when Trump started bulldozing us again. Even the language we Democrats use has often presented ourselves as menaced and offended. We call the Republicans, think about the names we use for the Republicans. The Republicans typically, including Trump, they ridicule us with belittling nicknames. They call us disgusting and immoral and unpatriotic and disgraceful. What do we call them? Terrifying, scary, hurtful, and offensive. Well, that's low dominance language to use for your opponents. And at long last, some Democratic leaders seem to realize that that doesn't work. So the new and improved Gavin Newsom, and it's really only been since about this spring when he completely changed, right? As a Californian, I can tell you we've been living with him for a long time. This is a new guy. So he got the memo. My ego wants to think he or someone on his team read my book, but I think that's probably not what happened here. I think there's something going on that has nothing to do with that. And how does he do it? His language terrifies, scares, hurts, and defends Trump. Here we have a Democrat who finally realizes the Democrats can't keep calling the Republicans bullies and leaving them in charge of the playground. Third, the high dominance leader embraces risk. I'll give you the most ordinary and important way that you can and should take risks if you're a politician. Answer the effing question. Whole thing, in its entirety, what you believe, not the question you wanted to be asked. Gaining a reputation for courage and chutzpah is a much surer way to win people over than is avoiding answers they might not want to hear. We got a poignant lesson in the penalties of risk aversion during the second half of the Harris campaign. Remember when the vice president started doing interviews? That's when she started faltering. So in her first big debut interview, Bill Whitaker of 60 Minutes interviewed her. And you guys probably remember this. She didn't answer a single question in that interview. In one of the questions, Whitaker asked her, how could she call a man a racist who millions and millions of Americans supported? She evaded the question, leading Whitaker to ask it again. She dodged again, offering something about Trump being a uniter and Americans Trump being a divider and Americans wanting a uniter, not a divider. She could have given an answer that would have blunted perceptions of liberal condescension toward Trump voters, seized the flag, earned herself a reputation as a bold truth teller, and crushed Trump's dominance game. Here's my version of what she should have said. This occurred to me when I watched this happen. You guys could think of something better than this. What I wanted her to say was, of course Trump is a racist and therefore an enemy of the United States. But most of those who voted for him are not racist. What they like about him is that he's owned the libs. But nobody owns this lib. Did you watch me shellac him in the debate a few weeks ago? No wonder he chickened out of a second one. And why are we even talking about Trump anyway? Biden smoked him 4 years ago, and I'm going to smoke him again in 4 weeks. Next question. Imagine if she would have made a habit of offering answers that sounded more like that, where we would be right now. So, embracing risk also means taking it behind enemy lines. And yes, that means going on right-wingers' podcasts. Yes, it means mixing it up in the so-called manosphere. Harris famously refused to do this, but Gavin Newsom, for one, is not making that mistake. It seems like every week he's getting into it with somebody the incels watch. Have you noticed this? But if you watch these podcasts, and I've studied them, he is not sucking up to Trumpsters at all. What he's doing is telling them that most of what Trump tells them is bullshit. And he's defending liberals, he's defending California and blue states, and he's calling red states, he does this again and again, welfare states, because they take more money from the federal government than they give. He's earning the guy's respect, even if they don't like what he's saying necessarily. Embracing risk also means enthusiastically picking battles that you don't think you can necessarily win. As a Californian, I can tell you, when the idea of Prop 50 first came along, it was by no means a sure thing at all. But Newsom dived in anyway. He made it, what's more, about what it was. A heroic, patriotic act of bare-knuckle combat to save American democracy. And look at the results. Democracy still matters to voters. It's not just about the price of groceries. I think that's absolutely key for all of us to internalize today. There's been a tendency since Biden lost and talked about democracy a lot to think Americans don't care about democracy. They just care about the price of eggs. That is simply not true. Newsom did not make his campaign about the price of eggs or defending the middle class or health care. He made it about democracy, and he won us over in the biggest of possible ways. I've been focusing on Newsom, but it's important to note that high dominance politics is not a distinctively male thing. There's a wave of recent evidence from the political science literature that voters do not penalize women for being tough and commanding. The notion that women cannot get away with being high dominance political leaders without seeming bitchy or unfeminine or unlikable does not stand up to the evidence. Now, maybe 20 years ago this was the case, but we've come a long way, including in recent years. Ovarian fortitude can overmatch the testicular variety in politics any day, just as in all other realms of social interaction. Witness Nancy Pelosi, AOC, Alyssa Slotkin, Jasmine Crockett. I could go on. So what about a bit of empirical evidence to back what I've been telling you? I'm going to show you some evidence that for some reason Democrats just ignore. But it's really important that we start paying attention. So in presidential election years between 1980 and 2020, the American National Election Studies, which political scientists are going to muck around in all the time, conducted surveys that asked people about the traits of the major party candidates. One trait they asked them about is whether the candidate is knowledgeable. In some cases, it's a tie, but is with the other questions. But when one candidate is seen as more knowledgeable, that candidate wins half the time and loses half the time. The survey also asked people whether they think each candidate really cares about people like you. Now, it's hard to think of anything we Democrats focus on more intently than showing voters how much we care. And indeed, if you look at the surveys, the Democrats always win on caring. Everybody always thinks that we're more caring. What's not clear is the voters care how much their leaders care. Because the more caring leader won 5 times and lost 4 times. The survey also asks, though, about whether strong leadership describes the candidates, and the strong leader never loses. Knowledgeable and caring lose about half the time. What about this past November? An AP survey conducted at the time of the election asked 4 questions about voters' assessments of the personal traits of leaders. One was, is the candidate honest and trustworthy? Harris, +10. Does the candidate have the mental capacity to serve effectively as president? Harris, +10. Does the candidate have the moral character to be president? Harris, +17. Is the candidate a strong leader? Trump, +19. End of story. So, of course, this doesn't mean that conveying compassion or being knowledgeable don't matter at all. The point here is that holding the advantage in terms of perceptions of strength is absolutely crucial. It's like the other virtues don't get activated unless courage guides their purveyor. Unfortunately, many of us liberals have come to regard dominance politics as a dirty business that's left to the bad guys. And the fact that Trump is all dominance all the time, just a charging alpha chimp, has turned us off even more on what I'm calling dominance politics. We liberals, let's face it, we also distrust othering opponents, us versus them thinking, and we further fear polarizing the electorate. But dominance politics is not inherently good or bad. How it's used just depends on who's using it. Republicans use dominance politics to pursue corrupt, oppressive, authoritarian ends. Democrats have mobilized dominance to fight for justice, freedom, and democracy. We did it in the past, and we can do it again today. That fact is not lost on some leading Democratic leaders today. Newsom, Mamdani, Slotkin, Crockett, Pat Ryan, Ruben Gallego, and Wes Moore are coming to the fore, and they're capturing our attention, and it's because they represent a break from the low dominance norm. It's not because they're such consistent progressives or because they're moderates. It's the fact that they're breaking with the low dominance norm that enables them to break through. And whether the party now tacks to the left or the center now is absorbing all our attention today. But actually, that's really of secondary importance. Whatever your political ideology, centrist or progressive or something in between, what will determine our performance in elections is whether higher or lower dominance tendencies predominate in our leaders. So stay dominant and keep on smiling. Pessimism is for losers, and in times of war, it is simply irresponsible. Exuberance, optimism, and confidence are manifestations of dominance, and they are vital to our prospects. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you. I think we are going to see if we can just flip our program slightly to adjust for folks' schedules. We're going to try to get our State of the Media panel up here. If I could see if we've got our folks here, we will just take a second and get things rejiggered around. We just need to get a couple more chairs up, and we will move on with our panel on the State of the Media, moderated by great former journalist and New Deal friend Linda Douglas, and she'll bring up the rest of the panel. So just bear with us for 1 second, and we will get started.
I literally just walked in. I spent 20 minutes trying to park. Hi, how are you? I was like, I know, but I have my car. So I just couldn't. What a pain in the butt.
So, is it Naya?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where are you going?
Rhode Island.
Ah, Rhody.
Rhody.
I grew up in Connecticut. I used to go to Musquamaket all the time. That was like the beach we went to. Which I don't know what that says about me, but I mean that was like fancy. That was like our big trip.
We'll start the time. We'll start at 15 minutes. 23 years now.
All right, thank you everybody for your patience. We're going to get started now as we spend the rest of this afternoon focused on the media landscape and how we help folks navigate that. We're going to start off with the State of the Media panel and then dig into how to effectively communicate online. And really pleased to welcome back to another New Deal convening, Linda Douglas. Linda, go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, good. So we are going to talk about what is arguably one of the most important threats to our democracy, and that is the state of the information and news ecosystem. And you're all trying to manage it, and we're going to try to help you think that through a little bit. But we really want to try to understand what's happened. So I was here a couple 3 years ago, and we had a conversation about the state of the news media. Back then, back in the old days, we were talking about the disappearance of local newspapers, the challenges of funding local news, the challenges of using local news, what was going to happen to it. Well, since then, since that last couple of years, it's turned into this wild landscape, populated by so many new actors and less trusted than ever, because now you really don't know what you're looking at anymore. So what you are facing every single day is a system of, most people get their news on social media or some, I mean, well, depending on your age group, but let's just say most people get their news on social media, an algorithm that is feeding you news that you agree, opinion that you agree with, a world that you agree with. You're with your fellow travelers all the time in the algorithm. You're learning less and less and less about the people around you who may not think like you. We have, this explosion of mis and disinformation, now compounded by AI. OpenAI is now talking about just creating like a whole world of deep fakes and artificial intelligence. So you have to keep saying, is this true? Is this real? I don't understand. Where'd this come from? You have the rise of billionaires, conservative billionaires, who are taking over legacy media, CBS, the Washington Post, and how is that affecting the news that you're getting? Sinclair, which is, buying up television stations and having a conservative tilt. So the challenges are just overwhelming. And we have here on our panel 3 really great experts who are on the cutting edge of all the changes that we're talking about here. So first, we're going to start with Tara McGowan, known to many of you already because she's one of our really great leaders in this group. And Tara is she's the founder and the publisher of Courier, which is this incredibly successful left-leaning news network with local newsrooms in 11 states, as well as national coverage. And just to give you an example of its reach, it's now got 8 million online subscribers, 4 million TikTok followers, and an average weekly reach of 120 million across national and state newsrooms. It's very good. Tara also was in mainstream media. She also did huge digital marketing campaigns, strategist for President Obama. Naveen Nayak has done all kinds of advocacy over his career. Spent a long time with the League of Conservation Voters in the climate change field. Was the president for 7 years of CAP, the Center for American Progress, and has created a fascinating new news organization, I guess you could call it news organization, called Resonate. Which is trying to reach people who have stopped consuming mainstream news, particularly from the traditional sources. And you're going to be really interested to learn about this. This is a tool you all need, by the way. And finally, my old friend Chris Cillizza, longtime, well-known political commentator, journalist, has migrated from the mainstream media and is now a political analyst for News Nation, which is a rising force in the ecosystem. He's got 32,000 subscribers of his daily Substack. We're going to talk about Substack. And he's got 81,000 subscribers to his YouTube channel. So we have, as I say, some experts here. And so looming over this whole conversation, and I hope you'll all keep this in mind, is the disintegration of the mainstream media, of which I was part for decades. And it's been quite sudden and quite shocking. So let's start with you, Tara, and because you were in the mainstream media, talking about why you created Courier and what need do you think it's filling?
Sure. Thank you, Linda. I'm so delighted to be here with you guys, and thank you, everybody, most especially Debbie, who changed my life by also introducing me to Ian, by the way. So for folks who haven't worked with him, they should. So I spent a very brief stint in mainstream media. I started my career at CBS News. I was in the evening news, and then I was at 60 Minutes for a few years. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot of really amazing fundamentals about journalism and reporting. Really, 60 Minutes was best in class. It's where a lot of journalism students always wanted to end up and start their careers, and I was very lucky to do that in some ways. But I also learned that objectivity was a total fallacy, that you learn a lot in journalism school, because every newsroom, no matter whether or not they are partisan, values-driven, or claim to be objective, they are making a lot of decisions based on what they cover, how they cover it and how often they cover it, right? And so I had a front row seat to that at CBS News, and I ended up covering the 2008 election there as a political producer, and then decided to go into politics after that, spent about a dozen years there. And in that time, I had always been a close student of right-wing media, paying very, very, very close attention to it. And also, Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message. And I really have always fundamentally believed that if you don't win the information war, you cannot win the political or the social war, full stop. And now we know that to be true in a lot of ways. And so the idea for Courier was born after running a lot of digital advertising and messaging campaigns on behalf of progressive causes and candidates, including President Obama, in 2012, and then I started a number of organizations after that, and I really came to believe that a few things. One, the disappearance of local media in general was disastrous for our democracy. Two, the changing ecosystem of information distribution with the internet and social media also meant that legacy media and really incredible long-standing news organizations like the New York Times and Washington Post, in order to stay relevant and stay in business, they started to only cater to elites, the wealthiest, highest educated Americans who would pay for news products. And 83% of Americans today do not pay for one single news product. So that means no Substacks, it means through no paywalls, which is where most good journalism was trapped when it was dependent on digital print and physical print journalism. So I started Courier because I felt that there was this huge chasm no one was talking about, because of course the journalists wouldn't talk about it, who worked for the elite publications, between people who have information and people who do not, the haves and the have-nots. And there is a direct correlation between access to local news, which is still the most trusted news source even among young people in this country. They cite that in polling, and civic participation. And I felt that it was also one of the reasons that Democrats were increasingly falling out of touch with a lot of their base constituencies, because these are folks who are lower income, who are not paying for news products, and thus still getting an enormous amount of information for free, but on their social media platforms and inboxes. So I started Courier in 2019, essentially to cater to regular Americans who are not paying for news products, and to meet them where they are, which is predominantly on social media platforms and through free email newsletters on a daily basis, earn their trust, be transparent about our values, because I think transparency is more important than objectivity. Let people decide, be very clear and upfront about where you stand and why, and to do it in a way that actually engages them, which unfortunately a lot of journalists hate to hear me say this, but the vast majority of Americans, including me, frankly, more often than not, do not read articles any longer. Our attention spans are shot. So most people in this country are informed and persuaded by headlines. Influencers and creators I know we'll talk about, and vertical video explainers, and just actual frequency, right? Flood the Zone is the whole thing. You have to drive narratives. Naveen's going to talk about that because he's built a really incredible newsletter everybody has to sign up for. So that was the impetus for Courier, and it has been wildly successful, in part because there is no other local free news on social media or newsletters in most counties, states. You guys all know this. You need local media across this country.
So you just said something really interesting there, because one of the things we're going to talk about is the rise of opinion journalism, which is almost ubiquitous now. I mean, even mainstream, so-called mainstream publications and television and so forth have the hint of opinion in them. It's pretty hard to find anything that is so-called neutral. You just said transparency is more important than objectivity. So you have news that leans in from a certain perspective. So Chris, let's now go to you. Sure. At the other enormous force now in the media ecosystem, and that is Substack. So you're on Substack, and most of the participants in Substack are providing opinion, and well-known journalists are flocking to Substack as a way to do either reporting or to simply give an opinion or do reporting that has a perspective. Why make that change? Why go there, and why are all these individual journalists moving in that direction?
Well, I mean, I think you offered a lot of really like high-minded reasons, which is nice. I mean, I think the main reason is because they didn't make money there. I mean, I like hate to say it, and people always say like, why did you decide to go into independent journalism? Because one day at the end of 2022, it was almost 3 years ago now, I got an email from Sam Feist, who is the DC bureau chief of CNN, and a woman whose name I didn't know, and I quickly like Googled it, and she's the head of HR. At CNN. If you ever get an email from those two people, like your big boss and the head of HR, it's almost certainly not going to end well for you. I called my agent at the time, and he's like, yeah, you're definitely getting laid off. And so, you know, I had to like go in, and they laid me off, which like is the story of, you know, legacy media at this point. I mean, you know, I was kind of in the beginning, middle of it, but it's, you know, Dallas Morning News just laid off 28 people yesterday. So I was thrust into it. You know, it's not like I basically went from making X amount of money to making $0, and I had to figure out, okay, well, what can I do? I'm not particularly good at. Some people say I'm not good at journalism, but I'm not particularly good at anything else. So I was like, you know, I'm not gonna like go build houses for a living. I'm terrible at that. So actually, I don't know. I may be great. I've never done it. So Substack was a thing. They reached out. I mean, the benefit of getting laid off publicly, as everybody knows about it. I mean, it's good and bad. Everybody in my world, not everybody in the world, but you know, so people reached out to me, and so Substack and YouTube reached out to me, and they were like, "Hey, we'd love to have you," and they kind of helped me get set up. I wish they did more, but they helped me get set up. They don't do that much more for you. And you know, I just started making content. I think Tara's point, I mean, we obviously don't come at it from exactly the same place ideologically, but I agree with two things that she said really hugely. One, transparency is more important than objectivity. Objectivity is bullshit. Everybody comes from, I am a white man raised in Connecticut. I went to a prep school, a boarding prep school for high school. I went to Georgetown, and I'm a journalist.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, man. Like, you know, like me, I always say to people, like, candidly, like, I have a better case to be the everyman than Donald Trump does, but, like, just barely. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I think you have to acknowledge that. So that's one thing I really agree with. And transparency, like, Tara's transparency is different than mine. Mine is like, look, you know, I don't really like either party. I try to, when they do good things, I try to say they do good things. When they do bad things, I do bad things. I don't wake up every morning thinking how terrible Donald Trump is. I don't wake up every morning thinking how terrible fill-in-the-blank Democrat is. Anyway, so that's...
That must be so nice.
Yes. Yeah. That's one. Two is, she said, and I'm paraphrasing, but the thing about content and making a bunch of content. That's there's no real secret there. Whether you're doing opinion journal, it's all about building a muscle. You have to build a habit, you know, and that's the hardest thing is when people come to me and they say like, well, I want to start doing this, which by the way, increasingly they do. I'm like, man, just figure out the fastest cadence you can do. Like anybody can run, I always say this, when I was in 7th and 8th grade, we did the fitness test thing and you had to run a mile right around the track. And at least the track I was on in Connecticut, it was 4 times round. I busted my ass on the first lap. I would sprint. I never learned my lesson. I'm an idiot. Because by the 3rd lap, I was like laying on the ground. So you got to set a cadence anybody can run fast for 1 lap. You got to set a cadence that you can keep up over time. But the more you do 10 push-ups a week, you'll be stronger than if you do 0 push-ups a week. You do 10 push-ups a day, you'll be stronger than if you did 10 push-ups a week. So it's like, I really do think in some ways the secret of succeeding in kind of the more independent space, at least for me, is just keep making content. Not any one thing is likely to make you Mr. Beast.
But just remember that the word content is now, you know, a synonym for news and information, for journalism, because now it's called content, which, again, in many, many cases, doesn't have a team of editors who are going through everything you wrote. They're not telling you you've got to cover the story about the water system in whatever city it might be, because maybe that's not what you want to write about. So you get to write about what you want to write about.
Yeah, my company has no standards and practices like CNN does. It has no like editorial structure because it's me and my wife.
Right.
And my wife makes thumbnails for the YouTube, and she helps like do some of the financial stuff because I'm not good at that. But yes, I mean, I think I like to think I was trained in a way that makes what I do pretty reliable, but it is not at all the same superstructure that these big companies have, which, by the way, is why it's sustainable. And one of the problems is, when we can talk about investigative journalism, I mean, how much investigative journalism makes for big legacy outlets? I mean, nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. I mean, it's a gigantic loss leader, but it does important stuff. We learned about black sites. We learned about, you know what I mean? But it's, no one would be like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a for-profit investigative journalism, and that's one of the problems with it.
So, but thank goodness for ProPublica. But so that now really brings us to Naveen and what you are doing here, because one of the things that troubles somebody like me who comes from traditional journalism, even though I clearly had strong opinions because I quit my job and went to work for Barack Obama, so obviously I had a political leaning to begin with, but I don't think my Republican my Republican sources cared as long as you reported factually, but you can't do that anymore. And so increasingly, as you're in your silo, where you are reading news that is news you tend to agree with and learning more and getting your opinions are becoming even stronger because now somebody in your cohort has another great idea that you can add to your, to whatever it is that you're saying to your friends. You understand less and less, potentially, about the people who you aren't reaching who might benefit from your perspective. So this brings us now to Naveen. Tell us what you're doing and why you're doing it and why it's so important to everybody in this room to follow it.
So I'll start with context on this. I, again, come from a perspective a long time in the advocacy space, and I didn't think about this at the time. I used to work at organizations that would run what are called independent expenditures or work on campaigns, and we basically had two ways of getting people's attention. We would either buy it, so we would do polling, figure out what the message is, and literally pay money to put that message in front of you and hope that you watched it. Or we would try to earn it by getting these people to cover it. That is still the dominant way that we do politics on the Democratic side. Donald Trump does not prioritize this strategy, but on the left, that is still how we think about communicating to the public. Now, there are obvious challenges with that, the biggest being when you want to earn media, there's less people on the other side of that. People are not reading the Washington Post or go through any of your outlets at the same level, local news, same challenges. The other problems, which Tara got to, is those outlets have lost credibility. People don't really trust them, especially for people under 40 that believe that they're actually getting anything more truthful from journalists or news outlets. And so part of what we have built at Resonate, it's actually set up as a nonprofit, and the theory is to actually help all of our allies on the left, electeds and partners, navigate this landscape and figure out how to actually reach people. And the first thing we've done is we've built a tool that actually tracks more than 12,000 accounts across 9 different platforms: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Truth Social, we pay attention to, Rumble. And I think one of the hardest parts about doing any of this work, whether you're on the elected side or the outside, is we don't have a sense of what people are actually hearing, right? Or we used to believe that you could read the New York Times, the Washington Post, maybe look at cable news, and you had a sense of what people were hearing. I hate to say this, unfortunately, too many elected officials still have that media diet and think they have a handle on what the American people are hearing. And that is not the case. So we put out a daily newsletter called What's Resonating that tries to help our audience understand what did the left, and we code every account of the 12,000 as left, right, or neutral. What was the left talking about yesterday? What content and what conversations actually broke through in the last 24 hours? And the scale would blow your mind, right? So we still think maybe in Washington, oh, let's go on CNN. Not anymore, but a couple of hundred. But, a few 100,000 people on a good night are watching CNN. On these channels across these platforms, we are talking about tens of millions of engagements, meaning likes, shares, or comments in 24 hours. The scale of the conversation is so huge, and we're just not paying attention to it. So the first tool here is just helping our understand what conversations and content Americans are engaging with it. And the second, which is the harder part, is actually starting to pull our side to engage in those conversations, right? There is a new muscle that we have to learn. It used to be you could go give a press conference and your coverage, you'd get the coverage and people would hear you. That is really not going to be enough anymore. And we've got to use the tools that are available to us across all these platforms and channels, partnering with entities like Courier, local creators, to figure out how you're going to get your message out. And I say that in part because it is a really new muscle that we have to learn, and I find our side being slow in picking it up, which is we had primarily what I would call a broadcast strategy for communication. We, if you're in Washington, which I've been for a while, we as Democrats wanted to know what is important that is happening in Washington that we want the American people to know. And there's a place for that, right? If there's something happening in your state capital or in the downtown in the city and you want people to know about it, there's a value for that. The difference in what has changed in the last 20 years is people are having conversations all the time about the stuff they care about. They are going to join conversations about sports and podcasts and entertainment and comedy and health and wellness. And think about where Donald Trump spends his time. He goes to those places. I do not think Donald Trump is a soccer fan. I'm not even sure he could tell you what the positions are. But when there's a large crowd of people at a sports game, at a soccer game, he knows that there is attention to be had by going there, and he will show up and create content around being at that event. We have got to figure out on the left how we actually go and join more of these conversations. So both monitor where they're happening and whether it is podcasts, whether it is smaller conversations, using our channels and our capacity to go and join them and actually be a part of the conversations and the interests Americans have.
So I'm going to ask a couple more questions and then open it up to questioning. We've got about 12 more minutes. But two really important things. There's actually three, but let me see if I can just boil it down to two. But one of them is the rise of the conservative billionaire ownership of media that does reach people because it's television. I mean, you could still get television, And so what is the solution to that? What is the remedy for news that is in the hands of people like Elon Musk? I mean, you thought we were going to talk about CBS here, but I mean, the fact is, Twitter is, a very right-leaning and very deceptive, disinformation-filled platform. Or the CBS thing. What do you do about that? And anybody can weigh in here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really scary moment because the way that I've described it is today there's essentially two kinds of media in that broad definition of the term media. There is independent media, like Courier and like Chris's Substack, and like if you're just a creator who's built a following on YouTube or Instagram, and then there's state-run media, which is the media that has already decided to capitulate to the administration and or is literally being bought and run by people who are in bed with this administration, if not for ideological reasons, increasingly for business interests, for shareholder interests. And so the thing that I lose a lot of sleep over right now isn't just the editorial decisions of what they're covering now at legacy brands, trusted brands like CNN and CBS, et cetera, but it's actually everything that's not being covered anymore. And that isn't going to be covered. And that's why independent media and resourcing creators, and the other thing I want to say, everybody does need to sign up to Naveen's newsletter. I read it every single day. It's so useful. But is that all of you have to be creators. You are creators and you have to be creators because you have the power to actually get your message across. And it's true that if you don't build a following on the platforms where people get their information today, you will be at a disadvantage politically, not just in elections, but in getting your policies across, building support for them, et cetera. And it doesn't mean you each need to be prolific at being on camera, right? You just have to be yourself. to Ian's point. And it will translate, but you do have to get savvy. It's no longer an option. And Resonate tracks politicians who have broken through because they can reach more with their own videos on Instagram and TikTok than most media brands in this country. So you guys have the rare opportunity of hearing this when you are at the levels that you are in to grow and grow locally and build those communities around your voice and your channels that will serve you for years and years to come. But that is the best way to circumvent what's happening with media that's bought up. The good news is none of those are valuable from a market perspective anymore. They are all troubled assets, but they are owning them now for the current share of audience they have. They are all losing audience share. What is gaining audience share is individuals and independent outlets.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, look, I understand the concern about it. At the same time, I think you can be short-term pessimistic, but long-term optimistic in that it kind of feels to me, and obviously this is self-serving for people like us who are up here, but it kind of feels to me like the war for like consumer eyeballs, content eyeballs is kind of over in that like my kids who are 16 and 13, they don't turn the television on ever. I mean, they turn it on to watch live sports occasionally. I mean, it's why ESPN pays so much money for live sports. The only thing people watch anymore. They get their news on their phone, exactly. So, like, I'm not saying, I always say to people, you're not going to go to WashingtonPost.com tomorrow and it's going to be a dead link. It's going to exist. I just think, like, people have chosen already. I don't anticipate, you know who still, I mean, if I remember this at CNN, you know what the average age of like a cable news television viewer is? It's like in the 70s. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, you know, the average age of someone who subscribes to a print newspaper, I mean, it's like probably 80. My point is like, I understand the concern and I think it's fair. At the same time, I do think the system is already self-correcting. I mean, just when Tara was saying, one thing I thought of, I taught a class at Georgetown last fall. I taught a campaign journalism class. Do you guys know who Jeff Jackson is? Mm-hmm. Okay, North Carolina. Yeah. He was he's the Attorney General now. He was in the House. He's Attorney General of North Carolina. Do you know how many people knew in my class? There were no freshmen, 19 to 21 years old. Do you know how many of the people knew who Jeff Jackson was in that class? All of them.
Wow.
Want to know why? You ever seen Jeff Jackson's TikTok presence? Yeah, well, you and several other million people who are nodding your head. You know how many people knew who Mitch McConnell was? Very few. You know how many people get in that room? There are 15 of them got their news from TikTok. Every single one of them. You know how many? These are people. The school pays for them to have subscription to the Washington Post. You know how often they got their news from Washington Post? You know where they got their news? This is fascinating. You guys know Talking Fish News? Have you ever heard of that? It's literally the fish from SpongeBob SquarePants. He pops up and a guy like reads news headlines. I mean, just like straight news headlines. That's like 2.5 million followers. They get their news from that. My point is like, it is a worthy conversation to have, particularly in the near term. I think it will solve itself in the long term. The only issue with the long term is, you know, these independent, like, what are the standards? What are, you know, I mean, that's a broader conversation, but I worry less about it in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I think we worry about the level of knowledge that our fellow citizens have, and I think we also worry about whether we understand how do we understand each other, how do we learn more about each other, which, you know, hopefully Naveen is at least you know, trying to address with the product that you're doing. But let's open it up for a few questions because I'm sure you have some, given that you all need to figure out how to communicate with your constituents. So who would like to ask a question? Oh my God, what a shy group. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me? You good?
There is a mic running around.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm loud. I apologize. Jamal Bailey, New York State Senator, Bronx, New York. Question about, you talked about local media, but I want to put a finer point on it. How can we connect to cultural media. And I want to give a perfect example. I represent the largest Jamaican community outside of Jamaica, West Indies, in the country. I went on a radio station, Irie Jam, couple mornings ago, got more love than when I go on News 12 or ABC or New York One ever, because it was hyper cultural, hyper local, right? But that's because I have the roots in the neighborhood. How can we make sure that everybody has the tools to not just local media, but cultural media? Because there is a distinct difference in especially areas that have different types of cultures. How can we make sure that we're effectively communicating to different cultures? Thank you.
Yeah, and we get this a lot, even sort of engaging with, when I think of cultural media, not just in that way, but just actually most of what's happening on the internet is actually cultural. When you look at the political conversation online compared to everything else people are talking about, it's still really small, and we don't engage in that part. I think all of if you're on the elected side, our offices are just set up wrong. When we go to brief people, their communications operations are still thinking in traditional ways, like it's who's going to write the press release? For where? How many reporters do you know? And very few people have set up their communications operation. How many people here know the 10 biggest creators in your state? Right? Very few. You need to treat them like reporters. You have to build your communications team should be building a relationship with them to know who they are. What are their interests? Send them stuff you're doing. They might not cover it. You're building a relationship. Go spend time with them, right? This used to be a very common political muscle 50 years ago when you were doing retail politics and you would go to the local sports shows because there was even fewer media outlets. The opportunity is there's so many more people with really sizable followings and audiences that care about these things, and we just don't do the legwork to figure out who they are and build a relationship. And what's resonating at a national level, I'm always stunned at how things will pop off that I've never heard of that are getting millions of views, and I think that's just all of us paying more attention outside of the people you actually follow to see what people are talking about.
Okay, any more questions?
I'll add one quick thing to what Naveen says. I'm amazed, how many people, this room is probably biased, but how many people in this room know who David Pac-Man is? Okay, not many, right? I didn't either. You know how many followers David Pac-Man has on YouTube? I mean, it was the last time I looked, when I did a collaboration with him, because I know who he was, and they were like, hey, you want to do a collaboration? I'm like, David Pac-Man, put it into Google, 3.5 million. It's probably more now, but my point is there's a whole, to Naveen's point, there's a whole ecosystem of these people. I talked to a woman, she writes an economics blog, Substack, blog, whatever. She writes an economics newsletter. She was telling me how it is not worth her time to go on Morning Joe. Just think about that. When I'm 49, when I was 25, I would have probably pushed someone in front of a bus to get on Morning Joe. But the more I thought, she's like, it's 35 minutes to get there. I'm on for 5 minutes. She's also doing really well, and she's 28. So it's it takes a long time to get there. I got to go back. I don't make any money from, actual money from it. She's like, I could record a YouTube video or an Instagram or a TikTok, and it comes right to me. I get the followers. I get the money. And I was like, my God, she's right. As I'm jackassing to every TV appearance. But the point is the way people consume has fundamentally changed, and it is not going back. And I think politics and media are I don't mean conservative liberal conservative. I mean conservative in we're just going to do things the way we've always done them. All right, well, we need to get a profile in the New York Times. And you'd love to get a profile in the New York Times, but most of the time that's going to be really, really hard when you could go to 5 people who could reach more people than that.
And I would just say part of the problem is that we are all trapped by the biases of what we consume. And so you think if you read the New York Times or your local newspaper and those opinion editors, your followers, hey, this is the important stuff. I want to be in the places where I consume things. And we have got to pull back to actually see what are Americans consuming. And the analogy I would give, which the other thing we do is we literally help book elected officials onto podcasts. Like people are, podcast world, whether it's on YouTube or Apple, is just exploding, again, around interests, cultural things people care about, go on those shows. But we had an opportunity, and it's just illustrative, so I won't use names, but who's heard of Dr. Mike? Okay, so this is a YouTube doctor who has 31 million followers across platforms, 14 million on YouTube alone. And he does, he blew up around COVID vaccines, but he does a lot of reaction videos. He'll watch The Pit. Who's seen The Pit? There you go. So or Grey's Anatomy or whatever, and react to the medical implications. He wanted an elected official who's a doctor to go on the show. Those shows consistently get hundreds of thousands of views. It is pulling teeth to get the elected official to prioritize that, because they don't know Dr. Mike. They've never heard of it. It doesn't have the cachet of being on Morning Joe. For sure, they would have prioritized. And so I do think we all have a responsibility to not be trapped by our own media diets and actually try to understand what are Americans consuming and pay attention to those things.
Yeah, I just want to underscore one more point, because I know we're over time, we have to go, but because you guys are all local leaders and I focus on local, there isn't a lot there, right? Like what we're talking about here, that's great if you're trying to build national profile, et cetera, that will be useful for some of you, but when it's at local, the opportunity is there though for your voice to be outsized by spending some intentional time and effort on what is your social media strategy. If you are in one of our 11 states, soon to be 12, if we have anyone from Utah in the house, we're launching in Utah next year. But if you're in one of the courier states, make sure you build relationships with our teams there. We're going to help you grow your social following, not just cover you and what you want to cover. But that's so important because it's such a small pond for you to become a big fish very, very quickly at the local level, because so much of the content reach and engagement is national. You can break through quite successfully. There's a lot of applicable tips that I can give you guys anytime. You can get my information certainly from Debbie, but that's the massive opportunity at local, that folks in Congress are competing for all these national eyeballs. It's much more difficult. You guys can actually become big fish if you spend a little intention on these platforms very, very quickly.
Okay, what useful information, I think, for this group. And who knows what we'll be talking about in a couple of years. I hope it's not AI, though. I mean, we didn't get into that, and that's like speculative right now, but...
We'll all be AI bots on stage.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Look out. Okay, thank you very much to a great panel.
Thank you, everybody.
Where do you go to TV?
Thank you to the panelists for their great insights. I'm Isabel Giovanetti, Digital Manager at New Deal, and I just wanted to take a moment to invite all New Deal leaders to our Digital Skills Breakfast tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. We're going to be expanding on what we're hearing this afternoon, and it'll be a great opportunity to hear from folks at Resonate and other digital partners about how you can expand your digital presence. So we really hope to see you there. Bring your breakfast. It's sure to be a great conversation. And speaking of digital presence, we're now welcoming up our next panel. We're going to dive into how to be successful in breaking through with your message in an evolving media landscape. We'll start with a discussion featuring two women who have figured out how to reach a lot of people on their online channels. West Virginia delegate Kayla Young has built a substantial social media following with her regular videos explaining how state government works.
Hi.
If you haven't seen it yet, you should check out her piece about social media on our Substack, The Roadmap. She's joined by longtime New Deal friend and political influencer Olivia Juliana, who has over 1 million followers and has produced content that has accumulated over 1 billion views. Yes. And there is no better person to lead this conversation than Ryan Coonerty. Ryan is a New Deal alum as a former mayor and county supervisor in Santa Cruz, California. But he is better known here as the co-host and founder of New Deal's award-winning podcast, An Honorable Profession. Please join me in welcoming our panel.
All right. I want to get real practical. We are going to focus on leveraging the skills and knowledge and experience of two high dominance leaders that we have I've been fortunate enough to interview on our podcast. And I want to jump right in because my first thought, having sat in your all shoes, is, okay, I sat through an 8-hour council meeting, hearing, I got a family, I got a job, I got all this stuff I have to do, and now you want me to be a content creator, and I'm going to get like 8 likes and a bunch of trolls, and I can't delete the trolls. And so, like, do I really have to do this? So I want to start with that question of, like, do we have to be content creators? Go.
Yes. Yes, you do have to be a content creator. First of all, thanks for staying all day, everybody. So claps for you. We're going to make this worth it. Yes, you do have to be content creators, but the good news is that the algorithms reward you for being exactly who you are all the time. So it's okay if you get on there and you're awkward and weird. That's fine. If that's who you are, great. We want that. We want you to be exactly who you are all the time, and the algorithms want you to be who you are. So get on there and be who you are. And really, I think short form video has really democratized that content doesn't have to be super perfect and super professional looking all the time. People want to see us as people. And in return, they treat us a little more like people and a little less like elected officials that they can just be super mean to. When they see you be a human, they treat you a little bit more like a human. So yes, you have to be a content creator.
Yes, you don't have a choice. You've listened to this great panel before us talk about how the media landscape has changed, and it's true. And I know when we talk about the media landscape, it seems like such a big national place, when that's not true. Like, a lot of content on social media is very localized. I live in Texas. I make videos about Texas politics. I talk about being from Houston sometimes, Harris County. By the way, my county commissioner is here somewhere, Leslie Briones, there she is. I voted for her, I helped flip that seat. But most of my followers, I have 786,000 followers on TikTok. 300,000 of those people live in Texas. Over, I think, 100,000 of them live in the city of Houston, because I talk about the issues that are relevant to the people who live in my state, who live in my city, and then people nationally who feel personally invested in those political conversations. They follow along too. And so, yeah, you absolutely should be a content creator, because you can and you will, if you take up that mantle, you will reach people in your local community who are looking for answers and looking to have a relationship with their elected officials.
Commissioner Briones is our current guest on our most recent podcast. Fantastic story, fantastic commitment to public service. I encourage you to check it out. Okay, so we have to do it. Give us a little bit of a sense of how to do it. What does personal look like? What kind of platforms? Walk us through.
All the platforms, all of them. And you don't even have to really pick all of them. If you feel like there's 2 or 3 that your team can really invest in, pick those 2 and 3, because it's better to be really good at 3 of them than kind of crappy at 5 or 6 of them. So pick your ones if you like it. I am a Twitter warrior. I am still on there. It still works. So people think that, but I get a lot of engagement on Twitter, on Instagram, TikTok, Substack, like, as many places as you feel best fits you, do it. As far as the content itself, people really do like when politicians are personalized and they feel like they're themselves. Do you know why Gavin Newsom is so successful with the content that him and his team are posting? Because it's genuinely believable that Gavin Newsom really hates those people. If Kathy Hochul or Andy Beshear tried to do the same exact thing, it wouldn't work. And I know that because it didn't work, because it's not authentic to who they are. If you are a nice, mild-mannered, funny politician, that content works. And I know he's not here, but Bob Duff is a New Deal leader. I adore his social media content. I think it is absolutely incredible because it's very authentic to who he is. So don't think you have to like get a mic and do a little dance and you have to, do the latest trend, because the youths will see it. Be yourself and your constituents will find you. And other people who may see themselves reflected in you might find you too.
Yeah, I will say, so I got started mostly on TikTok. I'm from West Virginia. I'm in the smallest Democratic minority in the country. Out of 100 people, we have 9. I mostly just started doing it to blow off steam and have fun myself. And then I realized that a lot of people have no clue what the hell we do for our jobs at all. I live in the capital city and people would be like, how's Washington? And I'm like, no, I work right there. And then they feel shame for not knowing that, right? Like, how many of you talk to people and they're like, oh, I'm not political. Guess what? They just don't know. They don't understand any of it at all because they never learned these things. Most of them never learned about city government, state government, period. They forgot the federal stuff. And so it's our job to make that easy for them to understand and to explain how that works. And the good news is, no matter what office you're in, there's unlimited potential content about talking about what your office does. So if you don't want to talk about yourself or your day or your caucus or the other side, you can just talk about, hey, here's where you park to get into the state capitol. I mean, honestly, like, mine's not easy to park at. So that's genuinely helpful to people. Or like, here's how you submit a public comment on the website for the new process, or here's how you look up the committee schedule or watch the YouTube. Like, there's all kinds of, there is endless content available. You can explain bills, you can do anything. We have so much at our hands and people do not understand it, and they want to desperately. And so not only that, you can build trust. I know I won my last election. I'm in a Trump plus 17 district, y'all. I know I won my last election because I built support with people on the other side who trust me because I just tell them what's going on.
Can you talk a little bit about when we think about the audience? I think many of us, if we make this content, we're thinking about our colleagues, we're thinking about, people, maybe the reporters that may cover it. But it strikes me, based on the conversations before and what you're all saying, that you're actually making it for a different set of people. And how do you get in that mindset to connect with folks where they are rather than the world, the fishbowl that we're all living in?
Yeah. I think you should think of making content as having a conversation with someone who lives in your district. I think that the more personable and just honest you are, people are going to be receptive to that. And then that brings into the question of, I'm only getting 2 or 3 likes on my post. Am I really reaching people if I'm only getting 2 or 3 likes? You are all elected officials. If 3 people came up to you at a civic club meeting and told you, I really liked what you had to say, could we please take a picture? You would be thrilled. So why would you minimize that accomplishment just because it's happening on social media? Social media has been democratized. This is where people are getting their information. It's where they're informing their decision on how they're going to vote. It's where they're getting the information on how they go to vote. So you should perceive it that way. And you can adjust to different platforms. The content that I make on Twitter is very different than the content that I make on Instagram. It's very different than the content I make on Substack or TikTok, because I know that each one of those platforms, my audience is different. And you and your staff, you can look at your analytics and see that. How old are the people who are seeing this content? Where do they live? What are their interests? My audience on TikTok are primarily people ages 18 to 24. My audience on Substack is primarily people ages 35 to 45. Same for Instagram. So the content that I make is different, and the topics that I talk about are different, because I know the issues that people who are first-time parents or who are just getting out of grad school or who are trying to buy a house are very different than the conversations I'd be having with the first-time voter who's watching the content that I'm making on TikTok. So you don't have to make it super highly professional. It could just be you talking to the camera. It could be a throwaway tweet. Whatever feels right for you, put it out there, because the volume is what matters, but adjusting based off your audience matters a lot too.
Can you give us when you say volume, what do you mean by volume?
Post as much as you can. as much as you can. When I am consulting on campaigns, I tell them you should be posting on Twitter at least 6 times a day. You should be posting on TikTok at least once a day. And it sounds like a lot. It sounds like a lot of work. You're elected officials. You're on camera all the time. If you're doing a press briefing on a local issue on the local news, clip it, post it on Instagram and TikTok. If you're talking at a city council or a county commission meeting, clip it, post it on TikTok, post it on Twitter. If you're going to a civic club meeting, take a picture of it, post it on Facebook. Like, it sounds like it's a lot of work. You're already making the media. You just have to cut it up and put it on the platforms. So just do that, get on camera and talk. I know you're probably gonna hate it. I'll be honest, you probably won't be very good at it the first few times you do it. I wasn't either. It took me, like a good 6 months to get into it. But don't let that stop you from trying, because the people who try and put as much content out there as they can and try new things and are willing to adapt are some of the elected officials that people like and look up to the most.
I completely agree. I mean, I think people love to see behind the scenes content of what we do also. You can really do anything and it works. The bar is very low. There are not a lot of people doing this sort of thing at all. Something that keeps me going, if you don't feel like doing this, and especially if you're in a minority, I have Republicans come up to me every single day, elected Republicans, and they come up and they say, people ask me every day if I know you. And I say back to them, no one ever asked me if I know you, and I just walk away. And they're mad that doesn't happen to them, right? So it's like, I might not have a lot of power in the State House, but they know that I'm on their ass every day, showing up and showing what they're saying.
All right, I gotta ask next question, because I'm old, but I was young compared to my colleagues. I was online, terrible incident happens. Actually, wasn't in my district, but was like 2 blocks out in another man's district. I spend the whole weekend getting hammered online, responding, da-da-da-da-da. I walk in the office Monday morning, my colleague who's like 75, not online at all, I'm like, how, rough weekend? He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I was like, I got hammered. So do you, once you post, how much interaction, how much responsiveness, how much of the secondary and tertiary conversations do you have to engage in?
So it's important to engage to some extent, whether it's you or somebody else, because the algorithm will reward that. So liking, post, commenting, you can reply with a video and answer a question if it's good and you want to. But I live by the rule of don't feed the trolls, unless sometimes you feel like, choosing violence that day. And sometimes you do, and sometimes that's okay too, but also sometimes people need to see how poorly we are treated and that we can have very human, authentic responses to that of like, hey, this isn't cool. Like, I had a bunch of negative mailers against me this year, and I got ahead of them by holding them up and being like, here's what they said, this is ridiculous. And so you can use it to your advantage sometimes.
You absolutely can use negative attention to your advantage. I know this better than probably anyone. If you don't know, look me up, you'll find it. I
actually think you should just tell us.
Okay. If you weren't, I was in New Deal 3 years ago, and I told this exact story, which is so funny. I was 19. I was an abortion rights activist. Matt Gaetz started talking smack about me on Twitter. I responded, and I was like, aren't you an alleged pedophile? And then I started fundraising for abortion funds in his name, and we raised $2 million. So, it's called rage bait. It can help you. And the other thing is, algorithms, like social media algorithms, they don't measure how people are feeling. They measure velocity. So if you have a bunch of people who are commenting hate comments on your posts, they're actually helping you in the algorithm, because your post will go from your supporters to your haters to people who might not know who you are at all. So what I do, I bait them on Twitter. I will post pictures of me just living my life with the meanest captions of like, MAGA would never understand what it's like to have a man pay for dinner like this. Like, I bait them, and you know what? It works. In the month of November alone, I have over 30 million impressions on Twitter. Over 30 million on that platform alone. And you know what happens as a result of that? I get DMs all the time. from moderate Republicans and independents who see how MAGA acts in my comment section, who sees the things they say about me as a young voter in this country. And they message me and say, I'm so sorry that's happening to you. I can't believe this is what my party has become. And so when you let these people, when you use the true nature of who they are now, when you just let them put that on display, you can reach a whole new demographic of people who, frankly, the independents are the demographics of people that we need to win a lot of these elections. So it can benefit you, but you just have to be the mental mindset to take on that kind of hate. And if you can get past that, you can definitely use it to your advantage.
Okay, we've talked about social media. Let's talk podcasts, and let's talk about these cultural phenomenon. So, how much do these folks need to be out on podcasts? And if they're non-political podcasts, I'm from Santa Cruz, I got to go on a Crystal podcast, right? Or whatever hippie podcast for how much time, and how valuable is that versus the quick hit social media?
I mean, I would say at a local level, it's not as important as it is for these national folks or people that are really trying to raise their profiles. I don't have any voters listening to Crystal podcasts, most likely. There aren't a lot of hyper-local podcasts, really. I really try to stay on local radio still. And I mean, I really think social media, you are on people's phones. 75% of my followers live in my district, and they're not all young. You might think you're like getting on there for the young people. That is not my audience at all. It is all ages. Everybody's on there, y'all. So for me, podcasts are not as big.
Go everywhere. If you have a podcast you want to go on, go on. And that doesn't even just mean like if it's something in your local area, if it's inherently political. If you're like a dad and you like to barbecue, and there's someone in your city who does like cooking shows, go barbecue with them. Like, don't politic it up all the time. Nobody likes the person that reminds the teacher that you didn't turn in your homework. Like, just be chill. Like, I love the Democratic Party. I've never voted for a Republican. We're scaring people because we're kind of nerdy all the time. Like, just be chill, be yourself, go shopping, go cook, do whatever. And there was somebody over here who said that he was from the Bronx. Was that you? Your answer of you going on, that was phenomenal. And that is exactly what elected officials should be doing, is going to the cultural hubs in your city and communicating directly with voters. So this is an example of a New York State leader who's already doing something right. Like, you should be doing that too. And just get out there and don't be afraid to mess up or sound a little dorky or whatever. Like, just be yourself. People like that. They feel like you're authentic. Me as a voter and as a creator, especially as a creator, there is nothing I hate more than when I'm watching a piece of content an elected official has made and I know that it's scripted. I can't stand it. It comes off so inauthentic. Just record and start yapping. And go meet the cultural content creators. But when you meet them for the first time, don't come in with an ask. The first time you meet someone, you shouldn't be asking them to do something. The first time you meet them should be the same way that you're treating a union leader or a civic club president. You need them to trust you before you get them to invest in you as a local elected official.
I would say it's the same for when you're making content for voters or for your constituents. Don't just show up and ask for their vote. You have to earn it. We all know how to do that.
Questions? Can we get
Hi, thank you guys. Mayor Leo from Durham. This sounds really important, and it sounds really easy. I know it takes a lot of time. I'm trying to get into it more. However, I'm noticing that it's really discouraging when you have this new wave of professional career organizers who also take everything you do and literally it becomes a messaging battle. I'm here this week speaking with congressional members about the ICE raids and was on Morning Joe on Monday morning talking about it, doing a media circuit. And I'm going back home and I'm going to lead a march protest with high school students. The clip on Morning Joe was taken and it's like look at what he's doing. He's just doing a media self-congratulatory, blah, 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 blah. I know we have to ignore that, but damn, it's so just discouraging. And the negative energy within the nature of our job already is so tough. I don't know if I really have a question. I just wanted to highlight that part of it. But I know we have to ignore it and keep pushing forward. I will say I've done that and practiced restraint to ignore it and just keep moving forward. And the impressions do go up, and I'm starting to get a following. So I guess I would say an inspirational thing, perspective. It's like I own restaurants in Durham, and my wife always looks at the one-star review, but we have like a 4.9 rating. And I think politics works the same. There's always going to be the loud detractors. But the messages that I'm getting is from my Hispanic community saying, we hear you and we appreciate it. So let's not be discouraged. Keep posting.
Yeah. Mayor, people love to complain and they hate to compliment. So it's like that. Also, Anderson Clayton, you've got a great group of content creators, and your state chair, Anderson, is killing it. So.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge, because I feel like you probably hear this rarely from people who are my age. I'm 23. You all are doing incredibly important work. It is thankless, exhausting, nonstop work. And I appreciate it greatly. I know, thank you, Leslie Briones. But and I've dealt with the same thing of people, like, just go look in my comment section on literally any platform. It's full of negativity. But I know that the reason why people spend so much time coming after me is because what I'm doing is effective. And to your point, if these are people who are in your district who are saying they're not doing enough, they're not saying the right thing, they're not here, they're somewhere else, your district trusted you and voted for you, you know better than the people who didn't win that election on how to represent your district. And taking criticism is fine, but don't let them distract you from the fact that you are all doing incredibly important work in an incredibly turbulent time. And frankly, people love to complain, and they're jealous. They're jealous. Let them be jealous. Stay focused on the mission at hand, and don't let the haters get to you.
So really quick, I just want to say thank you for the props earlier. I really, really appreciate it. Question about content length. How long is too long, right? Because sometimes I get on a live and I start going, and then I went too far, and then I realized that I've lost my own attention span. So how can I keep a voter's engagement? Like what is there? Is there a good? Is it like contextual? Is it predicated upon how serious you're trying to be? Are you trying to give it behind the scenes? Like, how long do the experts say is too long for content?
If you're on Instagram or TikTok, I would recommend keeping it under 90 seconds. If you're on Twitter or Threads, I wouldn't go longer than I think it's 240 characters. And if you're making videos, this is the most important piece of information I can give you. And this is gonna sound crazy, but follow me here. The first 5 seconds of any video you post should be like visual crack. People should be so overstimulated that they have no choice but to stay and watch the video. And if that means like you filmed a video that's like 1 minute and 30 seconds long and there's a 5-second clip towards the end in there that's really engaging, cut it, move it to the front, keep it at the end so people are engaged and they'll see that in the video. Lives are different. Stay on live for however long you want. TikTok, Instagram, they reward you for using the app. So if you're on it frequently, they'll recommend your content out to people.
Yeah, Instagram I think doesn't share to the For You page if it's over 3 minutes. For TikTok, I think it's good to, if you're gonna make the same kind of content over and over again, or Instagram also, have kind of a formula. Like, it's good to have a hook. Think of it as like, here's what needs to keep you there in that first 5 seconds. Think of it, headline of the news, here's what it is. Then say who you are and your credibility, but quickly. Like, don't start a video with like, hi, I'm Kayla. Nobody cares. Tell them what matters to them. Guess what the legislature took away from you this week? Hi, Kayla Young. I'm in the West Virginia legislature. Onward, and then we're going. No long pauses. You can cut them out. It rewards brevity.
Thanks. Hi, this is awesome. I'm Laura. I'm Laura Capps. I'm a county supervisor in Santa Barbara. And you mentioned explain to people, and it was previously mentioned that people spend about four minutes on politics. What I'm struggling with a little bit is there's so much anger and so much activism, and yet people don't know what we do versus what's coming down. And so I'll just bring up ICE. They're so upset about ICE raids, and they blame us, county. And so I'm finding that I'm trying to explain that it's not us, but I'm trying to do it in a way that's not defensive or makes them feel stupid for not knowing the levels of government, right? And then I'm explaining, and then I'm not doing all the things that you're telling up here, right? Being quick, being action-oriented, all of the things, because I'm sort of giving a government lesson, and I've lost them. And yet I totally am with them. Like, we're on the same side. I'm completely empathetic to where they're coming from, yet I'm sort of saying, well, oh, it's not, we're like, I don't control the sheriff, and it's the federal government and all these things. So I'm just sort of saying, like, how do you explain so that you can get to the heart of the question in terms of roles?
You might not like what I have to say.
No, go for it.
When you're explaining, you're losing.
I know.
Period.
Yeah.
If someone is asking you a question where you feel like you have to give an explanation, you shouldn't think of it as like, I have to teach this person what's going on. You should think of it as, offensively, where can I direct this message? Great example of this, the government shutdown. People don't know what the filibuster is. They have no idea that it requires 60 votes in the Senate to pass a CR. They don't know that. They did, at the time with the polling, they believed Democrats were weak, and they believed that Republicans were doing bad things. In response to that, the Democratic messaging on that was, well, Republicans control all three branches of the government. I don't have any power here. And it worked. For like the first 3-4 weeks, people believed it was Republicans' fault, and it was their choice. That worked. In your circumstance, you being like, it's not me, it's this person, you say, I hear you, I hear your frustration, I understand how terrible the situation is. I don't have the power to do something about it in this instance, but you do with your vote, because these are the people that are doing it. You can direct them to where they need to go, because if they feel like you're guilty, if you're explaining, they're gonna assume you're guilty. Yeah. So you have to stay on offense and direct their attention to the right place.
Yeah, thank you.
I think I have a little different answer, because I do a lot of government explaining, and I realize that in that it's a long game. I'm not trying to get something from them right then, but I do a whole lot of explaining how the government works, because if you guys haven't noticed, there's a lot of news organizations, there's not like a government Bill Nye. The Bill on Capitol Hill little cartoon, that's it. And everyone is always like, remember that? Because there's nothing else at all. No one's explaining how it works. Remember, did anybody see on Election Day the Secretary of State of Kentucky was like mad that people wanted to vote for Mamdani in Kentucky, and he was like, these people don't know anything. And it's like, that's your job. You're the Secretary of State. You're supposed to teach them that. Why are you being so rude? And like, it was just rude when he had an opportunity to teach people how it works. And so that is something that we can do. And you can just, it depends on what your goal is to get out of it from what they need or how you can help. But I mean, nobody knew what the CR was. Nobody knew what the filibuster was. So I typically stay in my lane of state government. I recommend you stay in your lane. But when SNAP was under fire and stopped, people were like, I don't understand. I was like, okay, putting on my federal hat, here's how this works. It takes 60 votes. There's filibuster. We're not going to get into that one. And just kind of hit the high points and do it quickly. And I think, yes, if you're explaining, you're losing, but not all the time if the goal isn't necessarily to win in that case. It's just to build trust and for people to understand the government. So I think both can be true.
All right, quick pitch, which is they've both offered, they're around for the conference. You want to know camera angles, you want to know all the things, that they'll do that. 8 a.m. tomorrow morning is an actual training here. So while you eat your breakfast sandwich, you can get trained up. And one more reminder, which is please make sure you're subscribing to An Honorable Profession. If you listen and highlight and share your fellow leaders, that means when you come on, there's a bigger audience and it's a flywheel, and that's our goal. And so make sure you are listening, sharing, liking, and supporting your fellow New Deal leaders. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right, that concludes our programming for today. But wait, there's more. as Ryan mentioned, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in the Freedom Room, where we partied the night away last night, there will be a digital training for leaders, 8 to 9 a.m. There will be pastries provided for those that are just coming straight to the ballroom, so non-leaders that aren't going to the digital training session. You'll have breakfast just outside this room. Programming starts for everyone right here at 9 a.m. tomorrow. For those that were registered for the VIP celebration this evening, buses will depart from the 15th Street entrance right above us on the lobby level. Again, buses will depart at 5:45 on the 15th Street side of the lobby. You will not be able to get in without your government-issued ID. Hopefully, we will see all of you at 9 p.m. at our after party at Astro Bar Beer Hall, the arcade room. Just show up to Astro Bar. We'll find you. We'll get you to the right place. That's 9 p.m. tonight until we won't say when. Then last two announcements. If you happen to have found a black Lululemon backpack, please find someone with a red name badge to help return that to its customer. And we'll see you at the after party. And then again, bright and early tomorrow morning. Thank you to everyone for today.